Welcome to Tripping Over Love, where we talk all about breakdowns, breakups, and breakthroughs. I'm Courtney Corona with Keith Miller.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm excited about our guest today. We're going to dive deep right into IFS.
Yeah. So Tammy Sollenberger is an IFS therapist and teacher. She's the host of a podcast called The One Inside. It's a podcast devoted entirely to internal family systems, this model of therapy that I've done for many years and one that has been really important to us in our communication.
Yeah, I always talk about IFS as I only know a little bit about it because you sort of introduced it to me 3 years ago when we met. But it's been so helpful in our conversations. And a lot of this podcast is about how do you have tough conversations with your partner and you still do it in a way that you feel safe. So it's great to dig in with, you're obviously trained in IFS and she is too. So we had a nice conversation and actually you both showed the process of what that looks like too in therapy, which I think is really nice to see for somebody who doesn't really know what IFS is. So they'll get to listen to it and sort of hear how it happens in practice, right?
Yeah, for some people it's just another TLA, or like we like to laugh,
TLA.
3-letter acronym like CBT, DBT, DBR. There's all these TLAs that that's the joke. IFS is one of those, and it's way more than that. It's a way of being, and it's a spiritual practice as well. So I think it's really cool. I think you're going to enjoy it. Tammy, welcome to Tripping Over Love. It's so great to have you here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. It's really nice to meet both of you or see both of you, however we want to say that.
However it is. And so, Tammy, I'm going to get started with just very basic 101, because I always tell Keith, I became fascinated with IFS when he and I met because it really helped transform how I approach relationships. So I've been trying to explain it to friends and anybody who will listen because it seriously changed the way I communicate. How do you go about explaining it to somebody who does not know anything about it?
Yeah, I love that question. What I usually say is depending on the context. So if I'm teaching like an IFS 101, I'll say, okay, so there's parts of you that don't want to be here right now. Like parts of you that are tired that would rather be in bed. Parts of you that are like, I've got paperwork to do. Parts of you that are like thinking about your kids, right? You've got all these different parts. And there might be a part of you that also wants to be here to learn something. And so what's it like for you just to notice there's all these different parts of you, and that it's a little bit, they're all different, and they're also different than who you are. And so I'll just kind of say it that way. My other favorite one is to use food, because we all have this struggle of, part of me wants to eat all the donuts. Like if my son has donuts or brings donuts home from school, and I'm like, yes, I want to eat all the donuts. But there's another part of me that's like, that's going to make you feel terrible and you need to eat the salad. And so we all just really naturally have different parts of us. So that's kind of how I begin it.
Right, and which makes so much sense. And to dig into that a little bit more, because you're self, right? So how do you explain what self is compared to the parts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I'll say, when you think about when you feel like you're you, and you're like, I feel like me right now. So maybe that's when you've gone for a hike. Maybe that's when you see a sunrise. Maybe that's when you're holding a baby. Maybe that's when you're just in a moment of flow or quiet, and you feel really, for me, it's like feeling really connected to myself. And I just feel like, I feel like me. And you kind of take a deep breath. That's the self, the essence of who we are. That's calm, clear, connected, creative, courageous. And that's who we really are. And we have, sometimes people say, I never feel that way. But I'm like, there's moments, there's glimpses of that self, that soul you. And so we just need to find them and then see how we can help you feel that way a little bit more by working with your parts.
Tammy, I know you started The One Inside, your podcast. How many years ago?
We're starting our 7th season. So it's been
Good
almost
you.
8 years. Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah.
I know you've passed the 200 episode mark. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I know when I did The Soul of Life and now doing Tripping Over Love with Courtney, it adds so much. It's therapeutic. It really allows me to think and see myself through the guests, through the people, through the conversations that I'm having with people. How did your podcast, when you think back 7-8 years ago, how did it change you, and did you expect to still be doing it 8 years later?
I definitely did not expect to keep that I would still be doing it. No. I think it was like this fun project. I had no idea how to do podcasting. And so I was like, let me see if I can do this fun project. But it really helped me. The model really became like in my bones, because I was constantly talking to people about it. And I was constantly like, not just by doing the podcast, but by just being a part of the community and being someone in the community that was connecting people. And I never thought that it would. I don't know, this sounds so dramatic, but a part of me is like, change me. Part of me wants to say, I never thought it would change me. So not only did IFS change me and change me personally and as a therapist in my relationships, but also I think, my part wants to say the podcast also changed me.
What do you think it is about IFS that people just grab onto? Because you two were educated in therapy, right? So you have a big background in that. But for the average person too, it seems to be that it's something that people just grab onto really quickly, because it's really helpful. But what do you think, just based off of your experience, what it is about IFS and the approach?
Yeah, well, people usually say it's because it's the way they were already thinking beforehand. I was already thinking about parts of me. I was already thinking about that. So it helps give name and format to something that they've already been experiencing. And so I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is it gives us this hope of like, oh, well, I'm there too. And so if I can be there too, I don't just have to go to this group or to my therapist to read this book. I have this access to this wisdom, to this healing right within me. And so I can tap into that. I can tap into the divine. I can tap into my resources at the same time that I tap into my true self. And so it gives people agency and hope.
Yeah. How do you think the IFS community has changed? Obviously, I started learning IFS, my first training was in 2008. So that's definitely not the first wave. It was around way before that. Maybe it was the second wave or third or something. But now it seems like after Bessel's book, and Dick and I have talked about this, I'm sure you've talked about it with him. After Bessel's book, it really took off. Yeah. Dan Siegel before that, but Bessel came on board and really wrote a chapter about it in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. So since that book topped the #1 bestseller list for, I think, like the longest of any nonfiction book ever, besides Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages.
Wow.
That's the only one I think that is higher. IFS just took off. You can't find trainings if you're a therapist, as you know. It's very difficult they're having a hard time keeping up with the demand. How do you think the community has changed with all of that growth? Because you've talked to so many people.
Yeah. Well, I think thankfully it's a little more diverse. I think that there was and there still is a large group of people that have been around Dick, helping Dick develop the model. So you've got this sort of group of people. So I just got back from the IFS conference, and this has been a discussion. There's this group of people that have been around for 30 years, helped develop the model. And so we've got that group of people. And then you have this other generation that are either just discovering it or have discovered it over the past 10, 15 years. And I think that it's more diverse. And there's more like, what else can we do? So that's the big thing I think that's happening in the IFS world is it's like, what else can we do with this? Like, yes, it's a therapy model. It's a modality. It's evidence-based. Yes, all that's true. But what else can we do with this so that we don't just change people one-on-one or even groups, but how do we change industry and business and schools? How do we bring this message into every place that we can get our hands on. So I think that's the other big thing that I've seen.
That actually brings me to a question. I mean, this is a pretty big conceptual question, but how do you think it can impact, I was going to say society, that seems like such a deep question, but as you go into schools and everything else, I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think just giving the language, like if you think about it with teachers, like just giving the language of like, okay, there are parts of me that would have rather stayed in bed and parts of me that are like, well, I'm excited to do my job. I've always wanted to be a teacher. And there's different parts of you. And guess what? There's also different parts of little Johnny sitting at your desk. And so there's the one that wants you to love him and like him and be a good boy, whatever that means. And there are other parts of him that are hungry or that are tired or that are lonely or that are struggling or that are getting tired of being picked on. So let's just notice the parts of me and the parts of you, like parts of me as a teacher and the parts of these kids. And what happens when I just begin to use that language? So then maybe I'm not as activated by little Johnny at the desk. And maybe I have a little bit more compassion for myself and my parts in my system and for these kids that I'm working with. And then I can bring that to my coworkers and the administration. Sort of like there's the kids and the teachers and the administration and everyone's against each other. So it's like, well, if we bring in parts language, we could really have a little bit more harmony and a little bit more understanding. That's just one example, just bringing in parts language. That's not even bringing in like self. I have a self, little Johnny has, we all have and we all are this beautiful, amazing self.
Yeah, it's so optimistic, right? That's one of the things that so many people talk about when they encounter it, as opposed to many of the world's religions, which have some sort of bent around there being original sin, or even psychology being there, disordered thinking.
Yeah.
In Dick and the IFS model, everybody who's been teaching it come out and say, no, there's no bad parts. So you have a part that imagines and has hallucinations and is dissociating. And yes, it's very disruptive, but if we try to attack that part and try to get rid of it, what happens? Well, it gets stronger. What we resist persists, as they say in neurobiology. And so no bad parts. How does, that's radical. How has that changed you? Is there any examples? Let's talk about like small, because I think people want to hear like, how does this
like
really
the tangible
work? Yeah,
things,
like in your life or with your relationship or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, let me say this about the original sin thing, because I think what gets ignored with original sin is there's also original blessing, and there's also like being made in divine image. And so we have to, if people hold on to the original sin, then it's like, okay, but there's also this other thing. We can't ignore this other thing, the original blessing and being made in God's image and divine image. And so how do you hold both? And so even asking that question to people that are like, no, it's original sin, then just sort of, can they be curious about that? Because there's also original blessing and being made in divine image. Let me think of a tangible example that I can use besides eating. we can talk about relationships. The eating is a good one.
I can certainly jump in with one that happened yesterday. Courtney and I were disagreeing about something with production, as we do frequently, like just like creative differences. And I was pushing my point of view and she was pushing her point of view, and we were really getting nowhere. And I'm not the hero in the story by any means, so I didn't do really great in that conversation. I was blended with or hijacked by this part of me that thought I was right and pushing was the best way to get through. And then I got some sleep. We both reflected on it. We both kind of made some helpful comments to each other about kind of just, relaxing a little bit. And then I was telling my son about this morning because I said that my problem in that conflict was that I wanted to be right now. Like I wanted to be right now instead of like giving her a chance to actually like do it her way, and then maybe figure out that it's true. My point was true, but she would have figured that out herself, and I could have been right later.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be right now, so I kind of flipped it on its head, and I was like, oh, it's like another part of me came in. I guess maybe we could say self came in and said, I want to be right now, like just here. As opposed to being correct now, I want it to be just present, and how much of a difference that would make to not worry about whether this is a problem. Like, let's see how it goes. Let's experiment, You have good things to say, I have good things to say, and it's all going to work out. So that's just one thing that just happened yesterday.
But that explains one reason why I was so interested in IFS when I learned about it when we first met, because Tammy, it was we were in a bit of different situation. Keith was living with his ex-wife at the time, and going through a divorce, going through all those feelings and the grief of losing a relationship and a family that he had envisioned, while our relationship was moving forward. But when we communicated about different parts, I started to understand the polarity that, look at me using language. I'm proud of myself for that one. But I started to understand how different feelings can happen at once. And logically, if you think about it, it makes sense. But when you're in the moment, it's hard to connect to that. But I found as I started to change the language that I used, and Keith did, I could understand that one part of him is certainly grieving. One part of him is, sad that he's going through this. But there's also a part of him that loves me and, wants to see that moving forward. So just to help you a bit, I think that's why, to me, it's so helpful. And so I'm curious from really hard conversations. I could give you a list of the things we talk about where I think most people are like, oh my God, you've said that to each other, and not derogatory or mean things, but very honest things. Hard things, yeah.
That are true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just curious how do you see that show up in your work that you do?
Before IFS, I'm like, okay, if you're still living with your ex-wife and you're grieving over your ex-wife, then you can't love me too, right? Those things can't exist at the same time. And that's, I think, the way most of us think, right? There's not a part that grieves that relationship in the dream and the future and what was supposed to happen or whatever, and then loves me and is excited to be in this new relationship with me. I can't hold both of those things. Those both can't be true in my head. But if we think about parts, I can completely understand how parts would feel very strongly about both of those things. And I love that example so much, and the idea that self is there too. So Keith has a part. We're just going to talk about Keith like he's not here. Keith has a part that
I do it all
is
the time.
Grieving
It's okay.
his marriage. Yeah. We're going to have girl time. Grieving his marriage. And then he has a part that is falling in love with you, Courtney. And then he is there. And so it's not just like devil and angel on your shoulder. It's also like, I am here too. And Keith can turn and be with the one that's grieving. And he can turn and be with the one that's falling in love. And his self energy and self-love and compassion and curiosity is big and wide enough to hold all of these polarized or opposing parts. Like Keith's love and who he is wide and big enough to hold all of it.
It's the other thing, Tammy, that we've talked about too, and I know you talk about a lot, are the protective parts. So what are those parts that tend to come up in sessions and with clients, and a protective part that probably a lot of people could relate to?
Yeah, well, I'm going to just keep using what's in front of me, which is you guys. So
go for it.
So my guess, and Keith, you don't have to say anything else about this, but my guess is there's a part of Keith that's like being correct or being right is really important to that part, right?
Yeah.
So you could have a part that says, okay, being right, being correct, having the right answer, being the one that wins the argument, that is a value for this part. And if we looked back through Keith's life, if that's something that's one of your major players, we're going to see that show up over and over and over again. And Keith, can get curious about that part and find out how that part has been trying to help and how that part originally has been protecting. Like, okay, well, if I'm right about something, then I won't get hurt. Or if I'm right about something, then I'm safe. Or if I'm right about something, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. Well, if I'm right, then I feel stable, safe, whatever that might be. And so the part of Keith that it needs to be right, that part doesn't necessarily care as much about connection or about Courtney's opinions being heard, right? It's just trying to protect Keith. And so it's a protector part that's like, if I'm right, then I'm safe. And so that part, that's a really good example of a protector part.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you can ask questions. I can ask questions, or my therapist, if you're my therapist, can ask questions like, what is that part afraid would happen if it didn't do this job so much, or if it couldn't do it at all? Right?
Yeah.
And that reveals the exiles, or it reveals other parts, let's just say,
Yeah.
that you might not have been aware of, that these two are in concert with.
Definitely. So Keith, if we were to have you yourself ask the part, let's just play with this for a second.
Please, yeah.
If we were to ask you to ask the part that wants to be right, that needs to be right, what is it afraid would happen if it wasn't right?
Yeah. And this is where I'm going to admit that this is like, I have to like disengage from the conversation, actually like listen. And that's one of the steps that, we haven't mentioned this, but like some people struggle with that. Like they want to just keep talking to us. And it's like, for me, the answer doesn't just come.
Right.
Let's do that awkward pause. I promise I won't say
I
it.
have to do the awkward pause.
As an anchor, I'm always like, oh, a pause, but go
Right,
ahead. Yeah,
right.
let's go through it.
Yeah. So let me sit with that for a moment. I would feel left behind or stupid is what comes up.
Okay.
Right. And so for me, let's just say in high school, because I think that's when it was most pronounced, I was very good at being kind of a first mover at things. And that was a strategy so that people thought I was good at it. Right. And so that masked I would say, lazy parts of me or parts of me that didn't have the support they needed to be engaged, that didn't take the time to learn something and just wanted to kind of participate, but without really being a full part of the whatever it is. I would never read my reading assignments. My kids should not listen to this. I had Cliff's Notes. Like I never read any book. I always went out and got those Cliff's Notes. So I took a lot of shortcuts. I sort of at the time as a kid like took pride in that. Like, look, I can still pull this off. So if I don't have the part of me that's right, it sort of reveals to me, oh, maybe I didn't do my homework.
Yeah.
Maybe I have something to learn here.
Yeah. Do you have a sense, and again, you don't have to answer this, but do you have a sense of like, my guess is that part is not lazy. There was a really good reason why that part was taking a shortcut. And do you have a sense of why? You said kind of he didn't have support or he didn't have the resources he needs. Like, do you have a sense of what was happening for the part that was like, I got to take the shortcut?
Yeah, I gotta sit with that as well. Well, I mean, the obvious answer is, and I know my brothers won't be listening to this, so I can say whatever I want about them, that my brothers were older than me. And just like leaving that as the only fact, like that meant I was always looking, I viewed them, it's very hard to tell like an 8-year-old kid that his 18-year-old brother is doing things that he can't do because he's 18.
Right.
So I sort of suffered from having this envy of them doing these things that I could never really be a part of. I mean, they tried, and they were great brothers at times, but they were also teenagers, and they weren't my parents, right? So they were doing their own things, but I looked to them and wanted them to include me in doing things.
Yeah. I love that because it sounds like to me that these parts are like there's wanting to be inclusion and belonging and togetherness. And so your system did a beautiful thing. It's like, okay, well, if I'm right, or if I'm appear that I have it going on, then I'll have some inclusion, some belonging.
Right. Yeah, so I have to work kind of hard at, and I mean work, I have to, there's a yielding, really, to me, it's more of I have to yield to the reality that I might not know something, and let those feelings come up, and let those feelings, as I sit with them, ultimately they inform me about things that are real, like that will motivate me to move in a certain direction and apply myself. Some people know this part of my story of getting divorced is right before I was getting divorced, I was in therapy. Therapy was I was spinning my wheels. My protector parts were, I would say, not putting on a show, but I couldn't get them to step aside. I couldn't go there. So I decided one thing that got revealed in that therapy was this younger part of me that just wanted to do something spectacular. and like, what would it be like if I could give that kid that wish? And that was to fly airplanes.
Oh.
And so I started doing that actually. And it didn't culminate in me becoming a pilot, but I had a lot of fun. It was really expansive and expensive. So I had to quit doing it. But that was an exercise for me that came out of doing exactly what you're saying, Tammy, is kind of getting in touch with that younger part, asking it what it would like and how it would like to feel whole. And it wanted to be like, hey, you can do this, and actually just follow the path and get the instruction and go through the program.
I want to ask something for somebody who maybe sees this for that silence, right? While you're thinking, what is going on? Either Tammy, you can answer this, or Keith, you. What's actually happening in your head? Because I would imagine somebody who hasn't gone through this maybe question, okay, why are you pausing versus just what you need to say? What's happening in that moment?
Yeah, for me, and I'm curious, maybe Tammy, you can comment on this too. But for me, it's a very learned automatic shift from me being like solo, as in like the solo I, to I'm having a conversation with another being, just like another person, let's just say. And I don't know what they're going to say. I have to wait for them to say it to me. So it's like something at first, I'll admit I was pretty skeptical. And I remember the lead trainer, Pam Krause, was a fantastic IFS trainer, was just like you said, Tammy. She's like, welcome to all of your skeptical parts. They don't have to believe any of this. I believe it, but you don't have to believe it. And so I was very comfortable just being skeptical. So at first, I was kind of like, nothing's going on. Like, what am I supposed to listen to? Like, what, all I have is my thoughts. But as I watched other people, I think modeling helps. If you don't get the chance, like some of my clients, I wish they had the chance to see other people doing IFS like we do in trainings. We watch each other being being in the hot seat, being at the center. And that gave me such permission to sort of be like, wow, I wonder if I could do it. Something's clearly happening for them. It's dramatic when you see somebody shift through, getting in touch with these voices or parts. So yeah, how about for you, Tammy?
Yeah. Well, we're jumping in and kind of not going through, like IFS actually has like this very lovely protocol to help people really connect with their parts. And we're not doing that. But what I would say is we all have these voices inside, right? Even if it's just their self-talk. And so what we're doing, and Keith just described it beautifully, it's almost like I'm pausing. If I think about the part of me that wants to eat the brownies, and I think about the part of me that wants to eat the kale, and I can hear them kind of arguing all day long in my self-talk, like, what am I going to eat later? What's going to happen? And then if I pause, like I'm here too, and I turn towards the one that wants to eat the brownies, and I'm like, hey buddy, say more, I'm listening to you. So we call this unblending in IFS. So I am here, and there's space between me and the one that eats the brownies. And so I'm pausing, quiet, maybe my eyes are shut, and I'm like, okay, one that wants to eat the brownies, tell me, I'm curious about you, tell me about your desire to eat the brownies, talk to me, tell me more about that. Okay, thank you. And then I'm going to turn towards the one that wants to eat the kale. I'm curious about that one. And there's this space between me and the one that wants to eat the kale. And then I'm pausing, maybe my eyes are closed, and I'm listening. Tell me more. And so it's, instead of what normally happens is we're here and we're watching an argument between our parts, right? No, I want brownies. No, I want kale. No, I want brownies. No, I want kale. Sort of and it either feels like it's us. We just sort of jump from kale to brownies to kale to brownies, or we're the observing. So it's almost like we enter the room, we enter the conversation and say, okay, I'm going to be here and be really curious about these voices. I'm going to call them parts, and I can turn towards them and find out what's their positive intention. This is part of No Bad Parts. What's your positive intention for me? You both probably are protecting me from something. You're protecting me. You want me to be happy. You have different perspectives of what will help me be happy.
Now, as you both were talking through that too, you're using specific language. And Tammy, you were talking before about just how you teach language in society and schools and all of that. Can you just dig into what that language is? So for couples, right, the thing that I've learned is I'm still not great at it, but a bit more on how you actually need to talk about how you're feeling. So can you talk more about just the words that you should be using and how you approach things a bit more sensitively?
Yeah, so if I could say, like, I am really pissed off because you did not put your dishes in the sink. And when you do that, I feel like I have to do everything for you, right? I could say that, right? Like, I'm pissed off you didn't put your dishes in the sink, and I feel like I have to do everything for you. And why can't you do anything yourself? You're such a piece of shit. So I could say that, right? So that's one way we could say stuff. That's one way we could communicate. Or in IFS, we could say, okay, a part of me is really frustrated that you're not putting your dishes in your sink. And a part of me really has made meaning out of that and says, if you don't put your dishes in the sink, then that means you don't actually care about me, you don't respect me, you don't, and then another part of me starts calling you names. And so I'm just noticing these parts of me that come up by something. And another part of me says, it's silly. I shouldn't be mad at you about that. Like we're divorced. We finally found each other. And yay, we're happy and we're in love. And a part of me says, ignore it. Don't say anything. But I know that if I don't say anything, then a part of me gets resentful. I mean, we can go on and on and on, right? Then a part of me gets resentful. And then I start like
it snowballs,
being passive aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to speak for all of this. And so if I say it that way, like a part of me is noticing this, making meaning, my partner may be not as triggered by that, right? Like he could say, okay, a part of me wants to be really defensive. A part of me wants to tell you how I got home really late last night and I didn't have a chance to. A part of me feels guilty. So then if I speak in my parts, there's more of a greater chance that my partner will then be able to speak in his parts.
Yeah.
And then we can actually get somewhere instead of just like, bah, 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 bah.
Yeah, it leaves like pivot points, right? It leaves these entry points. And the difference between speaking for our parts, like you described, there's a part of me that wants to tear my hair out or whatever, versus like I want to tear my hair out. That's speaking from the part. That's one of the things we teach all couples to do with this. Makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, and when we begin to see ourselves, and Courtney, you talk about this, like it really does change the way you see yourself, the way you see other people, the way you see the world, and then the way you interact with those things, the way you interact with yourself, the way you interact with your people, the way you interact with the world. And so the more, even if people are brand new to IFS, just begin by naming things in parts language. If I'm having a feeling, if I'm having a behavior, like whatever I'm experiencing, what if I just name like, oh, a part of me is experiencing that, and be really obnoxious with it, right? A part of me wants to pick up this pen. A part of me is feeling depressed. A part of me wants to watch TV. A part of me wants to go to bed. Like, okay, so what if I just begin to notice throughout the day, there are all these different parts. Some of them are just they're not, there's nothing wrong with them. They're not bad, or they're just sort of notice that there's all these different parts of me, and sometimes there's harmony, sometimes there's not. But what shifts by just naming myself and seeing myself in this lens of parts?
Well, I found it actually, at least for me, and I would imagine it helps me have more compassion for myself and kind of understand what's going on versus just berating myself over and over again. So yeah, that's been really helpful.
Where do you see the field going with IFS? I mean, I don't know if you ever, I don't recommend this, but dipping into Reddit forums that are talking about, like therapists talking about different modalities. And IFS, like other things, gets criticized, right, for different things. How do you see it evolving? And what do you think is next in 10 years? Do you think it has the staying power to kind of evolve into the consciousness like some of the great things that we've benefited from?
So I have I have 3 parts that just responded to that. One is I want to get on Reddit right now and see what you're talking about. I have that part. I have a part that says there's a difference between IFS and the IFS Institute. And depending on what happens with the IFS Institute depends on how far IFS can go and what the impact IFS can have. And the third part says that, I mean, obviously I'm totally sold out on IFS, and I think it's a beautiful model, and I think that it does have staying power. because I think that it really brings in a lot of different it has packaged a lot of different concepts very nicely, and it really goes along with a lot of other models. It's like a lot of models now I think are saying the same. There's a lot of models are saying the same thing. IFS has just really packaged it very nicely, and I do believe it has a staying power, and I think it really could change the world. I think we have a growth problem, right? IFS Institute has a growth problem they're really trying hard to deal with. They have been for the past couple of years. So I think it really is going to depend on the leadership and kind of what the organization does with trying to organize itself around the growth.
Right. And as far as I know, Dick is still involved. The founder is still involved with the organization. I know for a lot of organizations, it's the 2.0 version that kind of takes it after the founder steps back. And hands it off to other people. Sometimes that is where it really develops in ways that might have been hard to do with the creator kind of right there.
Yeah, so Dick is very involved, still is very involved, and Jean, his wife, has been named officially the vice president of IFS Institute. So we've known she's been involved, but it's like Dick and Jean and Katie, who's the CEO. So they're the kind of main people. And yes, Dick is very involved, and everybody wants a piece of him, and he's still doing book endorsements, and he's still very, very, very active.
He's very generous.
Yeah, he is. He definitely is. And so, I think there is some concern because there has been over the past couple of years, and I don't know if you know, I'm sure when you were around, and there were some people that it seemed like, okay, when Dick is he's going to have to retire. He's going to have to retire, I guess, at some point. I don't know. But like, who's going to take it? And so we'll see. I think we'll see what happens. But yeah, I don't know.
Have there been any guests that you've had in all the episodes? Because all of your episodes on the one inside focus on this topic, IFS, internal family systems, and all the related teaching and practice. And I've always admired that because I did probably like 12 episodes on IFS out of 80, some number. Mixed in with astronauts and musicians, and I didn't have again, going back to my childhood, I wanted to bounce around and do kind of a bunch of things. So Courtney's very helpful now with kind of mission.
I'm like, stay on strategy.
Orientating.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about one topic. So I really love that you do that. What guests have stood out or have been surprising to you?
Yeah. Well, I do think, and I'm going to answer the question, I do think it has been helpful. It's been helpful for me to be because I think I've needed boundaries around it. Because I don't know if this happens for you, but I get emails all the time about people pitching people to be on my podcast or people pitching themselves. And so it really is helpful to be I just am doing IFS. I'm just doing people that are in the IFS world. And if they're doing something fun and amazing and crazy, great. I love it. Let's do it. It doesn't have to be someone that wrote a book. There's more and more of that happening. With the spread of it and stuff, but I think that really has helped. I think that if I kind of had started with just mental health in general, I don't know what would have happened, but I think it has really helped. And again, the popularity of the model has helped because it's there's still so many fun things and so many cool people to talk to. We actually were just talking the other day about two episodes. One was Peter Malinowski, who is a Catholic. He runs this incredible, he's IFS trained. He runs this incredible Catholic IFS community. And his episode was and I know him personally, it was surprisingly amazing. It's one of those episodes, I don't know if you had this, Keith, but afterwards I felt so much self-energy. I felt like I just was swimming in self-energy. It was amazing because you get on and you're kind of heady and you're thinking about all this stuff, and but I think it's those moments where I'm I just felt like I was swimming in self-energy. So that was Peter. That was this year. And another one that really stands out to me that I had that same experience was Susan McConnell, who's one of they call them the mothers of IFS. She's one of I think there's 5 mothers of IFS that have been around or have been in relationship with Dick since the beginning. And she has a somatic IFS program and she wrote the somatic IFS book. So I talked to her right after her book came out, which was many years ago. And many years ago. When you get older, you're many years ago. Anyways,
some number.
I know. It's just like, whatever. And I felt the same way. Like, I think I either may have started crying because I just was like, it just felt so good to be with her. Like you're with a grandmother that's just so nurturing and loving, and you don't want to leave. And I remember so I think it's not the heady knowledge. I think it's the way I feel when I'm done, that I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting to feel that like that.
Well, it's really clear your heart is in it. I mean, that makes perfect sense knowing you. Like that's like the authenticity and the realness like comes out. And I think that's got to be one of the things that people love about your show.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I think, and I hear that over and over, and I have some parts that are like, stop being so vulnerable, like stop being so, but I think that's what people do. People say that, and that's what they like, and that's what they're drawn to and I think the same thing with you, like being real and being open, like that's what draws people. Like people don't want talking heads. There's plenty of talking heads out there.
Yeah, and I feel like it's healing too. I mean, this is where Keith and I really align, is just sharing our stories and talking about what we're going through. We both do it and are vulnerable about it because it's helpful for us. But then I also enjoy hearing it from other people too. And I think it's a way to create connection that we are really lacking right now, just because of the way the world is, So
yeah.
I think it's great. Well, Tammy, thank you so much. Such a great conversation.
Yeah, this has been so great. Is there anything that you want to share about what you're doing, ways people can get involved with you, where they can find you?
Yeah, so if they just go to my website, tammysollenberger.com, everything is there. And like, I think the both of you are starting to do stuff on Substack. So we're starting, if you go to like Substack, like the one inside Substack, however you do that, we're starting to do more like extra things. So we have the podcast, I wrote a book, I'm on Instagram, all that kind of crazy stuff. But then we're trying to do more like intimate live things and more things on Substack. That's kind of like a behind the scenes thing. So that's kind of where we're trying to put our energy right now. So yeah,
Great.
But you can find everything on my website.
Great to have you today. Thanks for listening to Tripping Over Love. Subscribe now to make sure you get the latest episode, and drop us a comment or a question. See you next time.